I'm so tired of people saying that it's just a movie, it's just a comic book, it's just a TV show. Whatever. No, it's not. Stories are the building blocks of our culture, of ourselves, even of our own psychology. We are a product of the stories we tell ourselves about our own past and the experiences on a daily basis, but also the stories that we choose to spend time with. What types of values or feelings or whatever are they promoting? What types that we like to spend our time around? They're going to shape us. They're going to shape our personality and character, and they're going to shape our perception of the world and the acts and behaviors that we put out into the world. And people don't understand that. They go, it's just a movie. It's just this. I can like and promote whatever I want. Well, of course you can, but you should pay attention to the responsibility that you have.
Consume stories responsibly.
As a member of society, as a human being, responsibility to yourself.
Consider the consequences.
You need some balance. You need some certain criteria that is going to make sure you're promoting the right kind of works, or at least have thought through the type of work that this or that story is going to do in our culture, and then make your own decision whether or not that's something you want to support.
Consume stories responsibly. Consider the consequences. Consume stories responsibly.
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another Office Hours live stream. Hopefully your week has been well, and everything's going great with you this weekend. Ready for the weekend? I know I am. It's I think I've said it before, but my weekend kind of starts Saturday night, not Friday night, because I have my daughter up to Saturday morning, and then it's a matter of dropping her off with her mother, which is a little bit of a drive, and coming back and getting ready and running to mass with my dear wife sound engraver, and then getting home, and then it's now this weekend. So good to have you guys here for my start of the weekend anyway. And I do have quite a few of you in the chat, which is interesting. I'm glad to see that, because I didn't know how many people would be interested in seeing this tonight's topic, but got a good handful of people in here, so thanks for being here. Hopefully it won't be a waste of your time. I think it's going to be good. It's going to be a little nebulous and a little esoteric, but I'll try not to get lost in that too much. There's a reason for it. And I'll start out with the reason why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. But first, let me welcome the chat. Darth Enigma was first. Great to see you. Darth Enigma, you even beat Ghost Planet Max Inc. And you have to get up pretty early in the morning to beat Ghost Planet Max Inc. to a live stream. So good on you. And welcome to you, Ghost Planet Max Inc., who was there just a hair second later. Great to see you. Nathaniel's Lowsball. Samuel Proctor says, the name of the stream tonight is Where Do Stories Come From? And Samuel Proctor says, I can answer, Professor. You see, when a mommy character and a daddy plot love each other very much, that love creates a baby story. See, these are the kind of conversations that Mormons and Catholics have with each other. It's usually about procreation and having kids because, Mormons and Catholics, right? Eldritch Fan is not feeling well, so wishing you some health, Eldritch Fan, and some healing. Hopefully things are getting better for you. I should mention, Eldritch Fan, that as long as I see you there and you remind me, the Star Wars EU book study, we're doing Outbound Flight next. Now, Al and I actually recorded a discussion of the first 3 chapters, and I was going to release it as part of my new Iconicast podcast and everything. It's funny, there kept being this echo. I mean, you guys have known, if you've heard me and Al on stream before, that sometimes there's just this echo, and I'm like, Al, what? There's an echo, and he gets mad. He gets crotchety. He's like, I don't hear an echo. I don't know what you're talking about. So I went back and listened to the YouTube video, because it's unlisted, where we streamed it as of now, and it's every time I talk, you see his halo light up, so it's coming back through his headphones, and he just doesn't realize it, and it's coming through his headphone. My voice is coming through his headphones and onto his mic, and it's funny. It's kind of like when you talk to somebody. Al's not all that old, but when you talk to like an old person, and they just they get mad because they refuse to learn technology. Like you're talking to your grandma on Zoom or something. You're like, Grandma, if you tilt the camera up just a little bit, we can see more than your chin. And she gets mad. It's like, I can't figure it. Just do it. It's fine. It's fine. You can hear me. You can see me. It's fine. That's what Al reminds me of. Trying to get him to figure out his audio. He's just like, rah! So you can hear it still into that on the stream, which is funny. and I'm still not sure exactly what to do with it. On the one hand, I can't release that as part of my podcast because the audio quality just isn't up to snuff for what I want for the Iconicast podcast. But I'm thinking maybe I was thinking I was going to release it maybe as a members only, but it's I'll just release it on this channel as a YouTube, but maybe put a disclaimer on the front. Hey guys, this is this is what we recorded. I might record a summary and do that for the podcast, and that's probably what I'll do going forward for the actual Iconicast podcast. Just actually, I was thinking about it. I'll record little summaries of the discussion, but also give some like discussion questions. Not that like assigning people have to answer essays or anything, but giving people things to think about and connections to make, and making it a little bit more like a like studying the book, in terms of like you would in a class or something, as opposed to just talking about it. So I think that's what I'm going to do for the podcast, and we'll see that coming up as part of episode 2 this month for Iconicast podcast. But anyway, all that, a little bit of a side note. I think I'll eventually release it here, and we'll see how that goes. So where was I? I was welcoming folks, and I was with Eldritch Fan there, still at the top. Imaginative Hobbyist, Leia Plus Size, my dear sweet sound engraver, of course. Slav, good to see you, channel member. And Samuel Proctor was a channel member, forgot to mention that. Let's see. AL, great to see AL as always. Studio Super, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Fizzocio Corner, Spidey Rules, everyone is here. So great to see everyone. Just checking through the chat, seeing if there's anything I need to know. Nathaniel Lisbo says, "When did you have the book study? I didn't get a notification." Yeah, that's the thing. We were recording it. We weren't posting. It was unlisted because I was gonna make it part of the podcast or something, and so I will post it at some point. Studio Super says, "Saw episode 1 of your podcast. I am knuckling down hard on doing a physical collection. Got to get copies because I unfortunately my stupid kid years." Oh yeah, the physical media. Yeah, thank you guys. Those of you who watched the Iconicast podcast episode 1. I was really pleased with how well that did, just even on YouTube. I thought, over 40 minutes podcast, they're not the kind of things that I'm used to getting traction on. If I release a long video, especially if there's no sort of hot button issue on the thumbnail, I views just tend to struggle on that. But I was impressed. I was impressed at the positive response I got. The comments. People were even emailing questions and comments for the next episode. I haven't checked yet. I did place it on Podbean, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify podcasts. I always want to say SoundCloud, but Spotify is what I mean. And I'm still working on there's extra hoops you got to jump through to get it on iTunes and stuff like that. So I haven't checked how well it's doing there yet. Probably not that great because I don't have a following there on those platforms, but I did just put it there so people can have it in other platforms. But thanks to those of you who did watch that. And if you haven't watched it yet, go check it out. It's on the channel here, and I'll always keep releasing them on the channel here. But it was a lot of fun to do, and I'm getting a great response from that. So we're already planning out and scripting episode 2. So it'll be fun. Owen Lister is here with us. Great to see Owen Lister. Oh, Owen Lister's giving us an update. He said, just finished watching The Searchers. Amazing film. We'll definitely check out other John Ford movies. That's great to hear, Owen Lister. He said that and you like the first episode of the Iconicast podcast. Great. Good to hear. Thank you for that. Yeah, we can do an analysis of The Searchers. In fact, I've probably talked about The Searchers at some point before, just in context of George Lucas. George Lucas was immensely influenced by John Ford in particular. And if you look at the sweeping snowscapes and whatnot in The Searchers, and there's that wonderful classic scene, because John Ford likes to use landscapes. If you look at John Ford films, whether it's the Western Desert or the epic rolling green hills of Ireland or the snowscapes or whatever, he really likes to use landscapes to the point where they're almost just like another character in his films. And George Lucas was very influenced by that. So if you look at episode 4, A New Hope, I mean, those wonderful scenes of R2 and C-3PO walking across the deserts of Tatooine, that's straight out of a John Ford movie. You can really see his influences coming through heavily there. So yeah, we'll talk more about that. It's great stuff. Samuel Proctor says, John Ford, the manliest man who ever made a manly movie. I know. Yeah, John Ford's very manly, man. Him and John Wayne were just a match made in heaven, right? Okay, let's talk about the topic for tonight. Where do stories come from? Now, as I said, this is probably going to get a little nebulous, maybe even a little esoteric. I also haven't really outlined this all out, but it's a topic I've been thinking about a lot. And I do talk about it somewhat in all of my classes. I've even talked about it on this channel, though I think it's been quite a while. But I never go into it as in depth as I'd like to. Story is really, it's the very basis of our human experience. What I mean by that is you think about the human experience, what sets apart humans from animals? Well, it's self-awareness, right? The ability to think of yourself as a entity, that kind of level of sentience. I mean, animals have it to a certain extent, but that's what sets off across humanity, that ability to really reflect upon your experiences. This is what makes us human. And really, when I say story here, I'm talking about the very basic hero's journey. That's why I never understand how, especially academics and whatnot, they will try to pretend the hero's journey. Oh, that's patriarchal. Oh, that's postcolonial. Whatever. Try to pretend that that's like of yesteryear, and we need to develop beyond the hero's journey. Let's get to more collective stories and not stories that focus so much on the individual. Well, you can't do that, because that's how a human being survives, by thinking of ourselves as the heroes of our own story. We have to think of ourselves as the heroes of our own story. That's very basic learning. I mean, that's how, primitive man has a run-in with the dancing red tongue and realizes, oh, that's fire. It's going to hurt me. Remember last time I had a challenge, I encountered the fire, it hurt me. Don't do that again. I mean, that's basic human experience, learning, thinking of yourselves as the hero of your own story and reflecting on the stories of your past and your experiences. So it's basic humanity. And we have to do that every day. Of course, now in modern times, whenever we go through any kind of challenge, any kind of trauma, or just new experience in general. I mean, just getting up in the morning and getting out of bed is a journey into the unknown, because you don't know what the future of that day is going to bring. So we and then at the end of those days, or even at the end of the experience within the day, we have to think back on it. We have to reflect on it. It's how we integrate it into ourselves. It's how we learn. It's how we grow and become better, and so forth. And, people who are able to reflect on their experiences more than others, tend to be people who grow a bit more as human beings. So it's integral there. And it's also, as I say in my intro, we are a product of the stories we tell ourselves psychologically. And by that, I don't mean stories are as in just fictitious stories. I mean, the more real our perception of things, and the more in touch with the reality and the objective truth of things, the better, off we'll be to a certain extent. But everybody has certain perceptions. One of the examples I give in my classes, for example, is I say, let's say I was, coming into a classroom and I'm giving this live lecture, and the person sitting in the front row just looks incredibly bored, and they even perhaps look a little pissed off, and they're not laughing at any of my jokes that I make during the lesson or whatever. They're not even remotely taking notes. They're just whatever. Now I see their reaction, and I might think, wow, I'm not that great of a teacher. I mean, look, I can't even get the person in the front row to at least acknowledge the presence of their teacher. Man, I'm just not that great of a teacher. But let's say that the reality of the situation is actually that they just found out that their dog died at home or whatever. So they are just totally in a different place. They're emotionally traumatized or whatever. That's the reason for their behaviors. It really doesn't matter, though, to me. If the story I've told myself about that experience is that they're reacting because I'm not a good teacher, then I'll internalize that, and I'll start to feel the consequence of not being a good teacher, and I'll feel guilty, and then I'll try to, it'll affect me, and I'll try to, not really, I'm just giving a hypothetical situation. I wouldn't really react that harshly to one student. I mean, heck, hardly any students pay attention these days, but you know what I'm saying? It's just an example. So even if the story isn't necessarily true, if you tell yourself the story and believe it's true, it might as well be true to a certain extent in terms of the effects it's going to have on you. So we are a product of the stories we tell ourselves, in that respect, just about our day, our daily experience. And then, of course, you get into higher structures and higher uh, context of life, whatever religious systems you believe in, there are stories involved, right? I mean, you believe them to be true, but they're still stories, and you're a product of those stories, believing that they're true. Politics, whatever side you take on politics, that's a product of the stories you believe to be true about those issues and so forth. So you can't get away from story. Story is the very basic building block of who you are as a human being. And as I say, when I say story, I mean the hero's journey, the basic hero's journey. I see, Eldritch fans talking about like the heroine journey. Yeah, there are all kind of variations of the hero's journey, but I'm talking about just the most basic level. Just strip it down to the most basic level of a human being, of us as the hero of our own stories, having to face the unknown, get through it, challenge it, conquer it, and then come out on the other side changed by it in some way. That's vitally important, so that's what I mean by that hero's experience. Now, if that's the case, if story is such a foundational part of our human existence, I mean the very foundation, of our metaphysical being, for the sake of anything, I mean it's, in some respect, you can say that even the human reflection upon God is God as story. Now, don't take me too far with this, because I'm not trying to lay it down some theology or whatever. But in general, any religion, a lot of religion, you can't think of God as a creator without God being the beginning and the end. I mean, the Bible, Christ is on the Alpha and the Omega, the Greek terms for beginning and end of the alphabet there, so there's always just sort of this linear, there's this narrative, like you can't even really conceive of a God without a story of some kind. So maybe that's as far as we'll go with that kind of thing. Now, if that is the case, if stories are so important to us, and even if we don't realize it, we are the product of stories, be they true, false, or some variation in between, then the type of stories that we spend time with is going to affect us too. The type of stories that we recognize are just stories. So like our fictions, the type of movies, books, television shows, comics, or whatever, the types of stories we tend to spend time with in terms just for entertainment purposes or recreation purposes. And I mean that. So not stories that we're consciously trying to drive to look at as religion or anything like that. Just, like at the end of the day when you just want to sit on the front of the TV and just veg, and just check out or whatever, we tend to have the idea, well, those kind of stories won't affect us because now I'm just vegging or I'm just looking at something for entertainment. So that's not going to affect me. How could you be so naive to think that wouldn't affect you? Even if consciously you realize that this is now a fiction story, this is for entertainment purposes, you're still so built on story that the stories you spend time with are going to affect you. And that's just a basic truth. If you watch a lot of types of nihilistic stories, well, you're not going to eventually have a great outlook on life. I mean, that's just kind of how the human mind works. Likewise, if you watch nothing but a bunch of fluff, if you watch nothing but a bunch of there's nothing wrong with fluff, okay? I love some just good old fluff, entertainment watching every now and then. But if that's all you ever watch, it's like a diet. Your brain and mind and soul isn't going to really be able to get the nutritional story value, any depth or anything like that. And even if you do, it's kind of a crude example. Okay, I'm going to give it anyway because it's kind of crude, but it's good. I think it's analogous, because I always think that good story is kind of like a diet. We understand that when it comes to food, we need to eat vitamins, we need to eat vegetables and so forth, and whatever your belief is about food, you need basic good nutrients, and people think that's not true about story somehow. Well, no, when it comes to story, I can just live on Twinkies and nothing but Twinkies and I'll be fine. Well, no, if story affects you, then you do have to pay attention to getting a certain depth of story as well. But even if you're watching good stories are really in depth, and by good, I don't mean necessarily, and the good guy always wins, I'm talking about the good written story, a depth of story, how whatever kind of genre story it is. even if you're watching some good stories and really partaking of that, if you're not really letting it do its work in you, or if you're not actually thinking about it or not watching it on any active level, it's kind of like what nutritionists talk about, how like you need probiotics in your system. Otherwise, if you take vitamins, you're just gonna, excrete them right out. They're not actually gonna get absorbed by your body. They're just gonna, end up in your waste or whatever. That's like it's a health thing or whatever. Your body needs to have certain help in order to absorb the vitamins and the vegetables and so forth that you eat. That's kind of what it's like when you do watch good story, but you're not actually trying to engage with it. You're just like letting it pass over you totally passively. You might as well not. You might as well not. You might as well just be watching fluff. So yeah, I see here, Sound Engraver. Even listening to recent YouTube streams have affected me. On stories, I struggle with sci-fi because I love the genre so much. I can only take so much at a time because it's often dark. Yeah, my dear Sound Engraver and I talk about this a lot. Both of us have had stints where we've just, trying to read new stories or whatever, have encountered really bad stories. And it's like, man, I need a break here. I need something good, something really meaty and in depth, and good to kind of cleanse my soul a bit here, because I've done nothing but really give myself to bad stories. And the reason that affects us so much is because we are actively really giving ourselves to the story and trying to draw everything we can out of it. If you're not doing that, then it'll take a little longer to affect you perhaps, but you'll still feel the loss. You'll still feel the need, the malnourishment, so to speak. Owen Lister says, would Hallmark movies be considered fluff, or the very definition of fluff? I'm not a Hallmark movie hater. I don't like them myself, just so they don't appeal to me. Of course, my buddy Big Al loves them. And I knew a lady. I mean, sort of know her. I went to my MFA program with her, who's written, quite a few of those Hallmark films. And she actually wrote that movie that was in theaters. Was it almost... That's some years ago now, maybe almost 10 years ago, not quite. But was it Mom's Night Out? I think it was called. Patricia Heaton. And so she does tend to write movies like that. And there's a certain art to them, sure. And I wouldn't say they're nothing but cotton candy, but they're definitely not, asparagus on the plate either, right? And even the people who write those movies would agree with me. So it's just, I'm not trying to shame any genre type, or maybe more of the empty-ish genre type fiction. Not at all. That's great. I enjoy a lot of that myself. I'm just saying that you do have to pay attention to the kind of stories you're pouring into your psyche and make sure that it's somewhat balanced. Studio Super says, I watch comedy, sitcoms, and lighthearted stuff at an epiphany party. People told me I was animated and very funny. So I do believe that the effective story also imitative naturally. Yeah. And, like I said, everything of those have their place, sitcoms and whatnot, if they're well written. In fact, I use episodes of like Everyone Loves Raymond to teach the basic plot structure of a story. We have a main, sitcoms are usually, if they're done well, if a sitcom's written well, it's written to where it's almost each stage of the story takes place before a commercial break. You can almost break it down like that. You've got your main character who wants something, but he can't get that thing. Commercial break. Then comes back and you've got the complications, and then the start of the B plot. There'll be a second character, with something, but it's not the main character that episode. The B plot starts and complications, commercial break, further complications nearing the climax, commercial break or whatever. And then you've got the little denouement, that runs at the end after the climax and while the credits are sort of rolling and stuff. So yeah, even a good cartoon or sitcom or something like that is going to be structured, if it's done well, it can be structured like that. So stories affect us. The fictional stories are going to affect us too. Now, we have to know where stories come from. Everything I just said, they're from the basic, metaphysical existence, the experiential fact of humanity, is story. And you need to understand that. And you need to understand it on the one hand for just basic story appreciation, health and whatnot, but especially if you're a writer, the more you understand that, the better. It's kind of like, you can still write stories without thinking about that or understanding it, but it's kind of like anything else. Like if you're a if you're a musician, I started playing bass back in the day in high school, just learning other bass lines I would listen to on stereo, just learning bass lines from ZZ Top or from Aerosmith or whatever, listening to them, kind of memorizing them and playing them. And that's great. I was playing a bass line and it was fun to play a bass line. And so you might say on some level I was a bass player because I was playing a bass line. Even when I started, jamming with other musicians or whatever at first, just as I'm learning, but I didn't really understand what I was doing. It's one thing to learn the notes in an order and then repeat them as with any instrument, but it's another thing to start learning, okay, this song has a key and there's a reason that I can play a C when the key is A minor instead of a C sharp. There's a reason I can, noodle around here or whatever. And when you start to understand just even a little bit of music theory and the real where, how the song was built, how the right notes come forth and the wrong notes sound bad, you start to understand how it works. Well, then you're a much better musician, no matter what instrument you play, because then you can start to do some variations. You can write your own bass line suddenly, or musical, compositions, whatever. That's the same way with anything. There were some other examples too. I come up with that. I forgot the other one I was thinking about, but writing is the same way. We're as human beings, we're so ingrained in story that it's somewhat easy for anybody just to kind of tell a story. And maybe you're even kind of just blessed with sort of a natural knack for it. People like to listen to you or like to hear your ideas about stories or whatever. So maybe you even have a natural knack for it. That'll take you a little farther as a writer than, somebody who doesn't have that. But really understanding where story comes from and what it's going to do in the listeners, it's going to do some work in your listeners. And once you really start to understand that, and then you start to think about the types of stories you want to tell, you can even be more purposeful about the types of effects you want to bring out with your story. It's the same thing, like I say, with archetypes all the time. Anybody can write a story about a frontiersman, but if you really understand the work that a frontiersman archetype does in our psyche and in our society, then you can make better decisions about your story. Then you can avoid pitfalls, things you might have your character to do that just don't resonate well or don't seem right with an audience because you've betrayed an archetype. You've started out with this archetype and then you've done something that, that character might, shouldn't do or whatever, or doesn't typically do in our stories and whatnot. So it helps. It helps knowing where these kind of things come from. Help. Yeah, Sound Engraver, thank you for the super chat, my dear. Music theory is key. Indeed. Indeed. All right, now we get to the second part of what I'm talking about here. The thumbnail, I had a bunch of different instances on that thumbnail where stories are such a part of the human experience that we experience them or we can find them in places that aren't even something we think of as story, not even a movie or a television show or a book or a comic or something like that. We find stories everywhere because it's such a part. Oh, I missed your. Oh, music theory is key. I got it. Okay, now I get the joke. Is key because the key of something. Yeah. Okay. Wow. It's when your mind is on to what you're gonna say. You know what I'm talking about. Sound Engraver. The imaginative hobbyist, this is a good comment. I'll read this before I finish out what I'm saying. It says, truly, when one limits themselves to one kind of story or genre from any form of art, they ultimately miss out on the rich variety of storytelling and what else is out there. It's true. It's true. It's fine and it's wonderful to have a favorite and to have your go-to that you stick with mainly or understand a lot and draw from a lot. But it's good to have some, as much as I love a good hero story, as much as I love a good aspirational hero story, I still dearly love some good old film noir, which isn't all that aspirational, really, So, yeah, troll piano keys too. There's levels to that joke because it's a very layered joke. All right, so the other thing I was talking about is you find stories in places that maybe you don't think about in general. The reason I came to think about this, first of all, I want to see if any of you name the source. If you look at the thumbnail for this stream, the source. Did any of you catch the source of the picture on the right hand, the bottom right hand corner? The girl, and the guy put the coat around her. If anybody knows the source of that image, you will have earned major points from me. But I'm just seeing if anybody throws it out there. The reason I put those images, though, was because quite recently, Billy Joel put out a new song, which is a big deal because he hasn't really put out anything seriously 100% original and a full fleshed out as a song since like 93 practically. I mean, that was his last album. He's been touring a lot, but he hasn't really done any kind of original music. Maybe some classical stuff here and there. So, and I was like, oh, this is so great, Billy Joel. And you might think, Billy Joel, I hear you talk about that kind of thing. Aren't you like a 80s rocker? And I am. But Billy Joel, he was actually the first cassette I ever bought. The first, that's how I bought albums back in the day. I was 8 years old, actually, because Disney's Oliver and Company was hitting theaters. So I was in third grade, 8 years old, and Billy Joel did the voice for the Artful Dodger. And I just thought that was so cool. And, I remember loving the character of the Dodger, in that movie, the adaptation of Dickens, and Billy Joel's voice and the songs and everything were just so cool. And so I picked up a album. I got my little Walkman. I got a Walkman for Christmas or something like that. And I got a cassette. I bought it with my own money, my own allowance. I went out and bought, and it was like the Essential or the Billy Joel's Greatest Hits. And I remember listening to these songs. And of course, I'm way too young to understand, the fullness of what's being discussed and everything in those songs. But one of the things that I've always deeply admired Billy Joel for is his ability to tell a story in a song. And some songwriters can really do that. That's not the case with all music, and it's not even, the purpose of all music or all types of songs. Some songs are just more about the beat or more about, whatever. But I've always been drawn to songs and songwriters who can really tell a good story. It's one of the reasons why I love Alice Cooper so much. Songwriters who get into a different character with each song and they tell a story, not like Once Upon a Time, this, and this. They're not like a third person narrator. Quite often it's first person quite often, but they're playing a character. Even if they're pulling something from their life experience, and each character in the song, I mean, you can, the better storyteller they are, the more you can know about them. They're from a certain walk of life, a certain, whatever. And from the beginning of rock, I mean, that was kind of, that's part of one of the folk music roots of rock is that ability to tell a story, going all the way back to Chuck Berry and whatnot. So you find stories in music, commercials. I got the image of the caveman, the caveman. Geico, so easy a caveman could use it. I used to freaking love those commercials, that campaign. I think they started doing them a little bit more. I even loved the television show they tried to do. They got like a few episodes in before it was canceled. But that commercial was just trying to sell a product, but it kind of created a little story. Like you kind of created a character once that character was reoccurring. And then, the different commercials, you kind of learn different things about the character. And it was kind of like, so it was a story. So even commercials, ad campaigns, they play on your need for story. That's wonderful. What else did I put on that thumbnail? It was Billy Joel, Caveman. What was on the bottom left of the thumbnail? I'm blanking on my own thumbnail now. Let me go look at it. It was, where is it? Oh yeah, Steamboat Willie. Yeah, even that's kind of a given, right? But even the old, Nickelodeons, or as they were called, the flickers and silent films and whatnot, were like that. Let me see if anybody got the reference to the bottom right hand of the thumbnail. You see, give anybody their Sam Product says, I'm too young for that reference. Nope. Anybody got this here? Yeah, AL, a lot of his music is a full story. You're right. Billy Joel is just phenomenal. They actually I saw a musical. I forgot what they called it. Moving Out. Yes, Moving Out, named after one of his songs. They did a musical of all of his songs, which was so easy to do because you can just take a main character as though they lived through all these experiences. It was really, really done. Really well done. What is a story that affected me? Good one, Andre Hernandez. Maybe if I got time at the end, I'll talk about that. Thank you. I do think I have good taste in music. See if anybody got the reference. No one's getting the reference. Oh, it hurts my heart. It hurts my heart that you guys don't get that reference. But that's okay. Yeah, I don't see anybody getting it. Okay, so it's Janie's Got a Gun. Come on, the music video for Aerosmith. Janie's Got a Gun. If anybody in here was a Zennial like myself, you'd know that. Wonderful music video. Janie's Got a Gun, of course, that wonderful song off Aerosmith's album Pump about the little girl whose father is sexually abusing her, and she ends up shooting him. She ends up killing him. It's a tragic story, but it's a great story in a song. But the music videos too, I put that in there because that's kind of a given, right? Because that's a music video done from a story that's actually from a song that's actually telling a story. But even a song, one Billy Joel song that's not so much narrative, that's one of my favorites by him, is We Didn't Start the Fire. He turned 40 years old and he started thinking about all the events he'd lived through, and it's a great song. It's a really rocking song. So the story itself doesn't so much tell a story. It tells the story of his generation, kind of. But the music video, I remember watching that music video. If you've ever seen the music video to We Didn't Start the Fire, you should look it up. Because it's got Billy Joel there standing in this apartment. It's like the same house or apartment. And he's this character who is just witnessing the families coming around him and the time periods passing. And he's there kind of reacting to them, laughing at them sometimes, listening to them, whatever. And it's artistic. It's because you remain there through all these different times and changing times, and maybe it's his memory or whatever. But watching it as a kid, I thought of this as like he's a ghost. He's a ghost in that house, and they can't see him, but he can see them. And so when the family first comes in like the 50s and the freshly married couple, and then they have a daughter who goes kind of crazy in the 60s, and then in the 70s, it shows like the passing, and he's just there through all of it, and no one acknowledges him. My mind, looking for a story, thought, oh, he's a ghost. So music videos, even if they're artistic and not necessarily trying to tell a story, the brain's going to interpret them in some which way as a story quite often. And some people are more given to this than others. Okay, so admittedly, I am such a story guy. It's what I look for in everything. Not everybody's like me to this extent. I've said that even if the only video games I really like to play are those that tell a story. I was never much on Pong, or some of the game, and it's nothing wrong with like those kind of games. Sound Engraver loves games that are more of a challenge and kind of thinner on story if they're fun, and a lot of people like that, and that's fine. But for me, it's always been about story because I'm just kind of more wired towards that, and some people might not be, and I get that, but it's still part of your human experience in general. And even though I may be way more sensitive to it or way more, interested in it, I think it's important nonetheless. That's why I don't think about things hitting public domain as an issue. They're going to be really horrible, crappy, even deconstructions ready to hit the screen as soon as any property hits public domain. I mean, we saw that with Mickey Mouse. Boom, Mickey Mouse, the horror movie, hit all, right away. And that's stupid, but I mean, let's be honest, they're telling bad stories with these characters now. People always talk about, yeah, but if Superman hit public domain, I mean, who's to stop this, and that? Who's to stop it now? I mean, maybe some different types of bad stories would be told that maybe aren't being told now, but at least we'd have the freedom to finally start telling good stories. And that's what I love about these characters that are beloved and that have such a place in the public psyche. When they become public domain, suddenly the people truly own the character, as they've always sort of owned them in spirit anyway. The copyright holder might be able to be the only one to write and sell a story with that character's name on it, but the public decides, the public consciousness, we decide what stories we're going to accept and what stories are going to continue and not die right there in the theater. So yeah, my thoughts on that. There's probably some more to say about that. Maybe I'll think of some more things to say here in a second, but I'm just going to skim through the chat a little bit here. A lot of people liking Billy Joel too. That's good to see. That's good to see. I'm glad people are. Billy Joel's just so epic. He's so amazing. His new song, it's it's one of his real slow ballads. That's the thing. Even his ballads, I'm not a big ballad person in general, but his slow songs, man, I'm there for him because they're telling such a great story. Man, he's so good. But his new song is kind of like, it's sort of like a meta narrative. It's sort of, you can imagine it's about a romantic relationship, but it's also sort of about him returning to writing songs, or returning to putting out something original, which is really interesting. He also had such great attitude, right? He was just such a cool. I mean, he is still he's still alive, but he back in the day, he was this young punk kid from was it Brooklyn? I mean, he's a New Yorker, and he was kind of a short guy, and he took piano lessons growing up in classical. I mean, he's a classically trained pianist. He can play. He understands classical music and how it works. And I remember him telling a story about how he was always getting beaten up because he's growing up on the streets of New York, walking to his piano lessons. He's kind of a short guy, so he took boxing lessons at the same time. And he's got that attitude. You need to have attitude if you're a pop rocker, a rock song rock writer or whatever. And that came through in his vocals and everything as well. But all of that depth of knowledge and human experience came through too. Man, he's great. He's great. You listen. I mean, if you're new to Billy Joel, pick up or listen to some of the greatest hits first, because there's a reason why those stories rose as hits and really resonated with culture. But there's some great finds on his albums too that didn't really make the top 40. All right, so good to see that there's some Billy Joel love happening. Let's see. Where did I go back to? I keep losing the chat. Oh, interesting. Yeah. One listener said, I remember some Fruit Loop commercials where Toucan Sam had his nephews go to Indiana Jones style adventures. Yeah. Those Saturday morning cartoons or commercials that aired during the cartoons. Those are great. They would try and tell little stories and stuff. The classic Thriller music video. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love music videos that try and tell a story. Those are great. Sound Engraver said, never watched music videos, sadly. Never been my thing. Yeah, I can't imagine you growing up on MTV, my love. But I'll show you some classics. AL said, I did say it was from a music video, but I couldn't see it because the live button was blocking a lot of it. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Maybe the position on the thumbnail was just where people couldn't see it much. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. We didn't start the fire. Ryan started the fire. A little Office reference for you from Owen Lister. Yep. The fire guy. Movie World Comics talks about Bob Dylan. Yeah, he's, definitely a big storyteller. I've never been a big Bob Dylan fan in terms of his performance. Like, his voice just never can get into it for myself. That's just me, though. But yeah, he's immensely influential. I mean, without Bob Dylan, we wouldn't have a lot of the great performing artists we've had. I love Tom Petty, so I do like the Traveling Wilburys that Bob Dylan was a part of. But just his voice is just like, I can't quite get into that. It's just me. But his songwriting is quite something. Such a Corner said, you would love Morrowind then. Skyrim doesn't focus on story? I thought Skyrim had pretty good stories to it. I haven't played it. I mean, I started playing it and I got sidetracked, but I thought Skyrim was pretty story based. I mean, you start out with a a story and narrative, but I haven't really fully played it. Good point. Yeah, Spidey rules. I'm talking about bad stories that come out, about characters. And he points out, hey, Brightburn came out and years away from Superman ever becoming public domain. Yep. And what did they do? They gave the producer of Brightburn Superman. Here, you write a real Superman story then, since you wrote the one about him becoming a horror. Oh, what are people thinking? I don't know. Popping through the chat. Andre Hernandez says, how would you tell a Superman story if you were only limited to the 1938 version with no kryptonite or Lex Luthor? Yeah, that would be the case, right? If Superman first comes into public domain, it'll be the golden age Superman. No kryptonite, no flight, Lex Luthor, just the very first incarnation that Siegel and Schuster started with. And the DNA for Superman was already there, but we didn't have that. We hadn't had that period of formation where the public says, yes, that's an important character. We like that story of that character, but here's some feedback, and it happens naturally and organically very shortly, in terms of no more than 10 years. Surely shouldn't even take that long, 5 or so. And that's the case of what happened to Superman, Batman as well, and we eventually evolved into the character from that. But you got that main character. I still think there are great ways of telling that story. I would love to, man. I would love to write a story, even if it was just nothing but the straight up golden age story. Superman, I think it'd be fun to do. I've seen other writers do it with Superman analogs, but it always ends up not going to the truth, justice, and the American way character. And now I realize if it was a copyright situation, you couldn't, take it that way. But in terms of certain words you would use and certain things, but I think it's still necessary. I think you still have to go that direction. So it'd be fun. I'd have a good time with it. Let's see. One listener, yeah, pianist who can throw hands sounds cool. Billy Joel is cool. He's like the epitome of cool. I remember I had a boss once. I was working at some like retail place, when I was younger, and she used to live in New York, off in the suburbs, wherever Billy Joel is now. And I think she was house sitting for somebody that lived out there in a really like swanky house or whatever. And she was driving there, and she didn't know the area too well because she was on her way to the house. And this car was like, just right up on her butt because she didn't know where she was going. And the car wanted to get around her and get where it wanted to. And she looked in the rearview mirror and realized it was Billy Joel. And she thought, Billy Joel's riding my bumper. This is so cool. And she like kept going slow so she could prolong the experience of Billy Joel. And he's there in the back of the rearview mirror, just like, Rawr! Oh, that was funny. That sounded like something I might do. I was like, oh, I can't lose this experience. I'll just keep pissing him off. Owen Lister, thank you so much for the super chat there. I got a couple super chats here. First of all, Isaiah Smith threw me a super chat. I've been back in the chat there. Sorry about that. Let me get to that first. Are you a fan of any foreign musical genres? I don't know exactly if what I was going to say qualifies. I don't know about foreign musical genres per se. There are some foreign musicians that I really enjoyed quite a bit. I've actually seen some in concert. Just coming to mind right off the bat, Al Andalus. I don't even know if they're still doing anything anymore, but it was a husband and wife. She was a flamenco guitar picker, really good. And he played a little bit of everything, a lot of Egyptian instruments and whatnot. And they were doing folk music. At least this one album that I have is them doing folk music that came from Spain, the Andalusian time period, if I remember my history correctly. But it was a certain time in Spain where there was a culture of Christian, Muslim, Jewish natures. They were all living sort of in this kind of Egyptian style culture society. And I think it happened in a certain time period. I forget, but it was just a really cool cultural melting pot where they were actually kind of peacefully coexisting. And some of the art that came out of that and the music that came out of that time period was really fantastical. Of course, I like some of the Irish, music, the Chieftains and whatnot. None of that's my go-to, but I have an album or two here and there that I like to listen to. So yeah, sort of English folk music, I like some of that stuff, but it's something I listen to every now and then, Oh, Lister for $9.99, thank you so much. Said I've been also reading some more manga lately. For example, I'm reading another cyberpunk noir story called Colorless. It takes place in a future where color is gone and humanity have mutated. That's interesting. You talk about manga cyberpunk noir story. I need to look back into in terms of anime. Did they ever put out? They probably put it out by now. The other Psycho-Pass movie. They were going to do a new one of Psycho-Pass, and I really did like, especially the first season of Psycho-Pass. I didn't hate second season of Psycho-Pass, but I was waiting for it to really. I don't know. It went some places I didn't like. one of the movies, I can't remember, was it 2 movies? I think there was one movie I liked, and the other that kind of goes out of Japan is almost like it didn't even feel like a Psycho-Pass movie. It was more like a war film or something. But they were supposed to do another one. No, I'm just thinking out loud. But thanks for thinking me about that. Leia Plus Size says, I heard a YouTuber say that killing Bruce Wayne in the Suicide Squad new video game is a good way to get Gen Z into liking comics. What? Who would know? What an idiotic statement. You can do a lot of things to get Gen Z liking comics, but if you make the comics do what they shouldn't do, then is it worth it? You know, I mean, we can tell stories about TikTokers or total nihilism or whatever, but if we erase all of these important archetypes, no. I love the universal smackdown that Rocksteady is getting over the Suicide Squad game. They deserve every bit of it. I hope they suffer the extent of every bit of it too, because how dare them? How dare them put that garbage out into society? Just, oh, yeah, I did a whole video before about how they just can't write. They never could write. As soon as they left Paul Dini, Arkham Knight is still a good game, but the story started going downhill from there. And you can tell because they're like, we can write. No, you can't. No, you can't. Andre Hernandez says, I'm not opposed to Superman being public domain, but don't you think it's pointless to write Superman because a lot of concepts were added to the lore much later? It would be a challenge, right? And to some extent, you'd be writing a character without so many things that you loved about him that did come later. But just the ability to be writing a character that you can call Superman would be pretty fun too. I would accept the challenge. But you're right. I'd be much more interested once more things about him came into public domain. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you couldn't have Jimmy Olsen, Doomsday, Daily Planet, or any of that. Yeah, none of that, the way it works. No, I'm not really into K-pop there, AL. K-pop, wait, is that... Let me make sure it's what I'm thinking it is. Yeah, not really for me. This South Korean culture, pop music, looks a little boy bandish. That's kind of what I was thinking of. What is sort of really super poppy. Probably not for me. I mean, I like jazz. I like probably my favorite jazz act. I don't even think this particular incarnation of them is together anymore. The John Jorgensen is a guitarist and clarinet player. Really phenomenal. I think he does some bluegrass stuff too, but he does jazz. And for a long time there, he was actually in the movie. What was it? Charlize Theron was in it. I forget the name of it, but he played Django Reinhardt. Of course, Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli were sort of the ones who really created gypsy jazz back in the day in Europe, and it was so great to hear. I love a good gypsy jazz song. And he put together this quintet that he would tour with, John Jorgensen, because he played Django in the movie, because he's a guitarist and he's really good. And if you ever look up on John Jorgensen Quintet, the gypsy jazz stuff they do. Oh man, they're so freaking amazing. It's I've seen them in concert 3 times, I think, when they would come through near where I was. I don't think he's touring with the quintet anymore. I think last I heard he was doing more bluegrass stuff, but phenomenal stuff. If you're not talking about, something of a genre that's not necessarily my go-to rock. It was good stuff. Isaiah Parks, thank you so much for the super chat there. Says the way to write Superman, I think you mean, is to have the people around go through collective character arcs by being exposed to his benevolence. Yeah, we've talked about this before. In fact, that's how I kind of wrote my Super Ant-Man analog story that I did that one time that was published, The Blue Wonder. But yeah, it's kind of like the guardian angel type in a story where they themselves aren't really the ones who are having the character arc in terms of, I mean, they can face a challenge. The hero can come in and fight a baddie, of course, but you're really seeing the effect of their influence and their inspiration on people. Yeah, I've done that already with a short story, and Yeah, that's a great way to write Superman. It's not the only way to write Superman, and you should, write, stories about him as well. But it's something sorely missed. Everybody wanting to get into his inner conflict and blah blah blah, and James Gunn talking about, where I found my hook in Superman is the dichotomy, the conflict between his aristocratic heritage, but his Earth upbringing. What? There's no conflict about that. Read, for crying out loud, read Darwin Cook's Kryptonite if you think there's a conflict there. There isn't. Anyway. I love Unbreakable, Imaginative Hobbyist. I think that's a really great film. I enjoyed that quite a bit. I hoped for more from Mr. Glass, but I was glad to at least get what we got, but I was hoping for some more. Going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but Spidey Rule says Rocksteady, talking about Rocksteady Games, are as dumb as their namesake from TMNT. They really are. I mean, I did a whole video on it, so I won't rehash it so much here, but you had Paul freaking Dini writing games for you, wrote Arkham Asylum and wrote Arkham City, and they were epically amazing. Even Arkham Origins is good because Jeff Johns didn't write it per se, but he was heavily involved or consulted in that writing process. And Arkham Knight, Rocksteady just like, meh, we don't need Paul Dini. We've been doing this enough. We can do it ourselves. No, you can't. No, you can't. That game seriously suffered in the story department because of them thinking they could just do it. And Suicide Squad kills the Justice League. I mean, that's what they wanted to do. I've never been interested in that game ever since they released the name of it. It just tells you right away that that's a horrible take on that, whether it was going to be literal or not. It turns out it's pretty literal, and I hope they lose so much money on that. I wouldn't cry if it just ends Rocksteady. I mean, somebody needs to be spanked hard for that. That is just awful. Let's see what else is going on here. I feel like there was something more that I was gonna say with the main topic, but I don't know. I got kind of through most of it, and then my brain went away. As happens sometimes. I will do some more of that. The Paul Dini stress level says Paul Dini wasn't diverse enough. Yeah, probably. That's probably why. Yeah, that's a good point. Who knows? Although I don't think they went and hired diversity. I don't think that was really the I think they just didn't want to pay him. I think that's it. When it comes to video games, you can't really, it's very hard to get into like writing video games. You really can't do. You almost have to be a developer or pitch an idea and have the game company develop it themselves. There's not really such a thing even as the writer. I mean, maybe there is, but it's like you can't really break into writing video games. That's because for the most part, video games don't care about story. They should care about it a lot more. And some stories are epic. I gravitate towards the ones that do tell a good story. But it's hard. But see, when they have a big name writer like Paul Dini who's going to write a game for them, well, they do that because it'll draw people to the game, but they have to pay a big name writer like Paul Dini more than they would just sort of an in-house person who comes up with a script real quick for them. So I think that's why they did it. They didn't want to pay him, and good enough for them for to get reaping the rewards of that. Yeah, Luis Sanchez. Thank you for the super chat there. I hope Rocksteady never makes another DC game. But then again, Zaslav wants every WB to be a live service bull. I want Warner Brothers does not deserve DC. Let's just say that right there. They do not deserve DC. It's horrible. What was I saying before I got sidetracked? I don't know. Oh, the podcast, the Iconic Ass podcast. Yeah. Ep 2 is coming up, and I'm going to talk about, one of the segments that I'm going to do in episode 1, it was about the first level of appreciating story is to own some physical media. That's good. Episode 2, I'm going to do a segment on going from consuming story to appreciating story. And I mean, talking in more depth about a little bit what I started to cover here about the idea of actively consuming story, not just passively. and a lot of people shy away from that. They get scared because, stories for my enjoyment. I don't want to feel like I'm in school studying it, taking notes on it. Well, no, you don't have to do that. But it's good to start training your brain to actively, think about the stuff that's going on in a story. You'll get a lot more enjoyment out of it. And that's some of the things I like to do with the book study too. Just the first 3 chapters of Outbound Flight. There's themes develop. There's echoing. There's 2 characters that have a similar situation in their lives. We see what Zahn is doing. It's good stuff. So we'll talk more about that on the episode. Oh yeah, the gameplay stuff, Samuel Proctor. Yeah, the tank. Having to do too much in the Batmobile. Yeah, there were some gameplay issues too here and there. But someone did I've seen a lot of videos do. Even aside from the horrible garbage concept and story of the Suicide Squad kills the Justice League, even aside from that, video games themselves, I saw somebody they said, look, these two games were made almost 10 years apart, and they showed images of Arkham Knight running through Gotham, or the panoramic views of the city or whatever. Then they showed images of the Suicide Squad, showing images of that city or running through, and it looks like that's like a last generation game or something. I mean, Arkham Knight looks so much better, and that was made like 10 years ago. And so it's just like, what have they been phoning this in for like a decade? I mean, it took them so long to do this game, and it comes out and everybody hates it, rightly so. It sucks. Just, I can't wait to see this crash and burn, and them to face some major consequences for this. Joel said they don't want Dini because he won't follow their social rules. I'm sure that's the case now. I don't know necessarily that was the case when they wouldn't hire him for Arkham Knight, though. I don't know if all this nonsense was quite fully taken over yet, right? Hydra hadn't totally taken over S.H.I.E.L.D. at that point. Yeah, right. Studio Super. I mean, how are you ever going to sell people on, hey, how would you like to murder your favorite heroes? I think they thought that whole stupid appeal of the very idea of the Suicide Squad, I think they thought that was going to be so much more popular than it was. It was sort of a flash in the pan, and that, as it should be. Something like what's Marvel's version of it? What's Marvel's Suicide Squad called? It's named by the guy from the Hulk. I can't think of the name. Somebody will write it in the chat. But either whether you're talking about that or the Suicide Squad themselves or whatever, this is not the 90s anymore. So, that idea is a little bit of got some interest. Thunderbolts. Thank you, Thunderbolts. Everybody's like, it's Thunderbolts. Everybody, that idea's got a little interest now and then, but you'll never, the Suicide Squad will never replace the Justice League as the draw for DC Comics, because that's not what the whole fictional universe or company's built on. It's just not. Yeah. Alrighty, folks. I am, as you can probably hear in my energy levels, I am winding right down. So, good stream tonight. Thank you guys for joining in. I think it's an important topic that I'm going to continue to think about and craft a bit more. And maybe I'll cut out some videos from this stream, but I'll probably go into a little bit more in depth about it in an episode of Iconicast podcast too. I'm going to still keep showing off some physical media finds on the Iconicast podcast. I've gotten some really cool things here and there. Every episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more about collecting. So that'll be an aspect of the podcast that never really goes away, even though it's not a fully developed segment. But again, thank you to those who watched that, and stay tuned for episode 2 coming out this month. It'll be good. Got another super chat here. Let me get before I sign off here. Andre Hernandez says, forget the Snyder cut. We need the Dini cut. Yes, of Arkham Knight. If not game, then I'll take it as a movie, cartoon, comic, or novel. Yeah, even if it's nothing to do with the story they ended up telling, he clearly, and he did say, he had a third story in mind. I mean, you can look at Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, and you can see these were very easily 2 installments of a trilogy. I mean, he definitely was going somewhere. And I would love to find out what story he had in mind to cap that off with, because he wrote not only the games, but he also wrote the comic adaptations, or comic book tie-ins rather, for both of those games, for Asylum and definitely for City. I think for Asylum too. I do accept, and I like, there's the animated film called The Assault on Arkham that I think is really good, which is a prequel to Arkham Asylum. So if you are looking for more from that universe, first of all, check out some of the comic book tie-ins. Skip all the ones from Night because that's ridiculous. But there are some comic book tie-ins. One with even Paul Dini about Arkham City. Even Arkham Origins had some interesting stuff. Although that almost kind of takes place in sort of a divergent timeline, if you ask me, because some of the retcons they did, some of the stuff established in the lore around Asylum. But go find the animated film Assault on Arkham. I quite like that, and it featured the Suicide Squad, and it was a prequel to Asylum, and it had Killer Frost, Harley, of course. It was good. It was quite good. I liked it. All right, folks. Well, that is it for me tonight. Thank you guys for hanging out. I had quite a few people in here. It was a really good turnout for tonight's topic. I didn't know if it would be that impressive or popular. So thank you guys for hanging in there. We'll talk about something maybe a little bit more pressing on pop culture next week, but see how that goes. And I'll cut out some of this and maybe pop some things on the channel throughout the week. Do remember my dear Sound Engraver streaming tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon, evening, 5:45ish is usually her time, whatever you want to call that, evening, afternoon, whatever. But check that out. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. It's always very much appreciated. Always appreciate you guys giving my channel some love. And until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the true blue hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.